Metroid Prime 4 Beyond looks incredible, but we all should have expected that, right? This is a new Metroid Prime game being made by Retro Studios. We've been waiting 18 years for this game since Prime 3, 8 since the game was even revealed back in 2017. It's been a long time coming for this game, and I'm just gonna give you my thoughts, how I feel about the game, what we've seen so far, how Nintendo is marketing it, how they're basically combining it with Switch 2, which means one of my videos has not aged well, as well as just the overall situation surrounding Switch 2. Now, if I was a good YouTube content creator, boy, I would have had this video up ages ago, like sometime last week, but as it is, I've been pretty busy. I've been doing videos for Commonwealth Realm. You can go check those out after this video. I've also just had a birthday. I just turned 30 years old yesterday as of recording this, so yay me, my back hurts. So yeah, I've been pretty busy, but I wanted to give you all an update on my thoughts about this game. I have many thoughts, some of which I've shared on Twitter and Blue Sky, starting with that second look at gameplay from the Nintendo Direct focused only on Switch 1. This was the Direct that happened before the Switch 2 Direct, and I'm so glad that we got to see the game before that big Switch 2 information blowout, and the game looks incredible. Yes, you could tell this was clearly running on Switch 1. The textures don't look as high quality. The resolution on Switch 1 is pretty low, but this is the trailer where we got to see Samus's new psychic abilities. She's got that third eye like in Doctor Strange Multiverse of Madness, basically giving her those psychic abilities such as opening doors. That was such a bad choice of narration. Like, who approved that line? But the coolest part was being able to control where your beam goes so you can shoot 3 enemies at the same time. Very similar to stuff we've seen like in Bulletstorm, I believe. Pretty cool stuff there. I agree that in a sense that trailer was a little underwhelming. I don't even think it's technically called a trailer. It's like another look at the gameplay. I'll talk about this more when we talk about how Nintendo's marketing this game. But then, of course, we saw Metroid Prime 4 again in the Switch 2 Nintendo Direct. Very briefly, I might add. I remember people were speculating that we'd get a release date in this Direct that lands on the same day as the Switch 2, basically making it a cross-gen launch title. That didn't happen exactly like I predicted it would. I've accepted like a month ago at this point that this game is not going to come out with the Switch 2 because the Switch 2 is going to be pushing Mario Kart. And look at that. I was right again. Not to say I haven't been wrong before. I thought this game was going to come out before Switch 2. Some of you know I've been preaching that like for over a year now, but that's not happening. It's not even coming out on launch day. It's coming out after the Switch 2. But before I get too sidetracked there, they did show off about 30-45 seconds of this game on Switch 2, the Switch 2 edition specifically. So they showed us what the game looked like on Switch 1 the week prior, because they were going to briefly talk about the Switch 2 edition of this game in the Direct, and it looks very clearly better than on Switch 1. I wouldn't say it's like a complete graphical overhaul. The lighting's the same, like the visuals still look the same. We all should have expected it to look the same, but a little bit better, and that's exactly what we're getting here. It's still so much better to the point where I'd rather play it on Switch 2 than Switch 1. Like the 4K 60 FPS just looks great, especially with those mouse controls. I don't realistically know how often I would actually use the mouse controls because my gaming setup in my living room where my Switch 2 is going to be, it doesn't really allow for mouse controls unless I have a TV tray in front of me pretty much. So I don't know how often I'd be using the mouse controls, but it's still cool that they're an option. But what really surprised me was that I was getting 2 graphics modes, 4K 60 FPS, the quality mode, and the performance mode at 1080p 120 FPS. I didn't even think the Switch 2 was going to support 120 FPS, period. I didn't feel like Nintendo cared about that stuff, but lo and behold, they do. They're not only just putting it in their other games, they're making their Switch 2 display 120 Hz, so you'll be able to play that game at 720p 120 FPS on that display. But I got myself a VRR refresh rate on my TV in my living room, so you know I'm going to be setting up at 120 FPS on that bad boy. Maybe for my second playthrough, though. I think for my first playthrough, I'm going to stick to 4K 60 FPS, partially because I'm more than likely going to be capturing footage of that game, and my capture card doesn't support 120 FPS, but I was probably going to do 4K anyway, just because I want to see how good that game looks on my 75-inch display. It's going to look so good, and we saw more of this game at the Nintendo Treehouse at 4K 60 FPS, and Oh my god. It looks incredible. I compared it to Revenge of the Sith, just like my buddy Rob did, who's a big Star Wars prequel fan, and it just looks incredible, very cinematic. I know I have said in the past, I do preach it often too, is that realistic graphics are kind of hurting the video game industry because AAA developers are just focusing way too much on high graphical fidelity, but I feel like in this case, Metroid Prime has kind of deserved to be like the stepping stone in that regard. Like, if you look back at the first two Metroid Prime games, they look insanely good even today, so it would only be natural for Retro Studios to continue pushing the power of Nintendo platforms by making Metroid Prime 4 look so good graphically, all while still maintaining like its own style. This looks insane, guys. I already had high expectations for Retro Studios when it comes to Metroid Prime 4's visuals, but they somehow exceeded those expectations. And I know this is running on Switch 2. We don't yet know what like these cutscenes in particular look like on Switch 1. We already saw like a minute of this level running on Switch 1 back in the first look footage from June 2024, but just looking at it now, wow, the lighting, the particle effects is a straight up war that we're seeing. Those Federation Force mechs are back too, which I didn't notice the first time because they look actually cool and not super lame like they do in Federation Force. I don't really have time to like do a full in-depth analysis on everything we've seen from Metroid Prime 4 these past 2 weeks, but I have my good buddies Rob, Rule2 Review, and Super Metal Dave. They've done their own analyses, so be sure to check them out if you're dying for a more in-depth look at all of this footage. As for me, I just have time to give you my unfiltered thoughts about this game, and it just, what more can I say? This is exactly what I've been wanting for the past 18 years. I was 12 years old when Metroid Prime 3 came out. I know Prime 3 is looked at as kind of like the least good of an already great trilogy, and I still love revisiting Prime 3. It's a visual stunner on the Wii, and I actually liked the voice acting elements, some of which are returning here in Prime 4. I don't doubt they'll hold back on some of it because Prime 3 was maybe a little too chatty, but we still got Federation troopers talking. We got that sage-looking alien talking in their own language, which is really cool. But of course, not only was this section played at the Treehouse, but a lot of people who've already been to the Switch 2 experience in New York have gotten their chance to go hands-on with the game, and so far I've been hearing nothing but positivity around it. Obviously, this is just the beginning of the game, the very beginning, which is very on rails, go from here to here. This isn't going to be what Metroid Prime 4 is in its entirety. It's going to be focused on exploration once you get past that prologue, where I'm sure it's going to be set only on that planet Vuros, and you're going to be wondering why Samus is called the Chosen One, why does she have all these psychic abilities and whatnot. Even still, the demo people got to play, I've heard nothing but positive things about the mouse controls, about how great the game looks at 1080p 120 frames per second, and seeing how that one boss looks and how it has weak points that you can lock on with the mouse controls, or I think with the gyro controls too if you're using just a regular controller, which I'm going to be real, I'm probably going to be using a regular Switch 2 Pro controller when I play this game, but you know I gotta check out those mouse controls too, like just see how good it looks. I'm still not convinced it's going to be entirely comfortable because you still got face buttons you gotta press, and like I just don't see it working with this. But yeah, Metroid Prime 4, it looks incredible. I'm glad it's getting all this positive buzz after people have played it at the Nintendo Switch 2 experience. And if you're going to the Nintendo Switch 2 experience in any other location, LA, Dallas, or what have you, Austin, I think, I don't remember, some city in Texas, I envy you very much, and tell me how much you like Metroid Prime 4 Beyond. But now I want to talk more about how this game is being marketed, how it's being promoted with the Switch 2, or even just without the Switch 2, because that's kind of been an interesting subject to talk about. A lot of people are saying that Nintendo's not pushing this game hard enough, or they are just not making appealing enough material. They're not necessarily convincing potential new fans to jump into this series. It all feels very safe, like it's just through and through a Metroid Prime game made only for Metroid Prime fans, which to me, that's great. I'm a huge Metroid Prime fan, and all this nonsense about making Metroid Prime open world to appeal to a broader audience has got to stop. I'm not opposed to like a side Metroid game being open world, but the point of Metroid in Metroid Prime is that it's set in these corridors where you're just going back and forth, like finding an object that'll help you open a door or a device that makes your ball go up and down a half pipe. That's what Metroid Prime is, and by making it open world, you take away that feeling of like item progression, something that Zelda really lost when it made its full-blown open world transition with this new wild era. What I do agree with, though, is that this game needs to be presented better, like way better. Going back to that initial showing in the Switch 1 Direct, it was a very like by the numbers showcase on what you can do in this game. It didn't really present the information in a way that was exciting for potential new fans of the series. You know, it was exciting for me and other Metroid Prime fans, right? Because it was a new look at Metroid Prime 4. Of course we were going to be excited, but this is a series that frankly needs the sales numbers to go up a little bit. And I know this trailer didn't do much for non-fans of the series. And then we move over to the Nintendo Switch 2 Direct, which only showed a very brief segment of the game running on Nintendo Switch 2. Does it look beautiful? Absolutely. But again, it didn't do much to convince people to pick up the game. Maybe I'm wrong, some people might have saw it and been like, ooh, I can't wait to pick this game up on Switch 2. But I just know those numbers are minuscule and they just need to do better to promote this game, which, you know, in their defense, this game still does not have a release date yet. It has a release year, 2025, but we still don't know when exactly. A lot of people are speculating sometime between August and October. You know, Dread came out in October, Prime 3 came out in August, I believe, way back in 2007. So those months seem accurate, especially because I don't think Nintendo has any other game dated for those months. What I'm thinking here is that yes, Nintendo is keeping things light on the Metroid Prime promotion, but at the very least they're letting people play it at the Switch 2 experience, and they gave it its own dedicated segment in the Nintendo Treehouse, which in and of itself, that's a big deal. I'm very glad they took the time to show this game off in like an uncut live streamed fashion. I think come closer to that game's release, we're going to see more of a Metroid Prime 4 advertising blowout, not unlike what we saw with Metroid Dread back in 2021. I swear it was like every other week we got something new, some new information about that game through the Metroid Dread reports, and the trailers were pretty great too. Like, they were exciting. They showed the game off in action. It was cut to some pretty upbeat music. I would love to think that Nintendo is working on a trailer, like a launch or release date trailer that's similar, maybe not too similar because Metroid's not as big as of a franchise, but something that's so like reminiscent of the final trailers for Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom. Those trailers are some of the best I've seen in video games, and I would love it if Nintendo took the time to make something that is maybe half as good as those. Something to get people really pumped for the first Metroid Prime game in 18 years. Like the first original one. Yeah, Prime Remastered came out like 2 years ago, but this is a new Prime game, dude. That's insane to me to think about. Like, I don't think the gravity of that has set in yet. We're getting a new Metroid Prime game this year, guys. This was a series that thrived in the 2000s when, you know, Nickelback and Avril Lavigne were like the top charts on the radio, dude. Now we're in a completely different era, and this is a game that's being revitalized for this new generation, especially on Switch 2. And that's another thing. Like, did this game not being a Switch 2 launch title potentially hurt its sales chances? I actually don't think so, but not for any reason I would have thought of like before that Switch 2 Direct, because let's be real, the conversation around the Switch 2 is not entirely positive for a couple of reasons, namely price tags. Because, you know, this is a pretty expensive piece of tech, $450 by itself, $500 with the Mario Kart World bundle, but then Mario Kart World by itself is going to be $80 US, which is just insane. The Nintendo of America president Doug Bowser is saying things that are pissing people off, not even forgetting the fact that pre-orders for this console were delayed not just here but in Canada as well because of the potential impact these new tariffs will have on this machine. That part is not necessarily Nintendo's fault, but it's the fault of this just awful administration that we have here in the United States. That's not just going to affect the United States economy, but the world economy in general. I'm just more upset about the economic toll it's going to take on this entire world, not just with video games, but every single thing we're going to buy. So anyway, back to Metroid. Maybe it's good that Prime 4 misses the Switch 2 like launch lineup, because there's just a lot of negativity around it, you know, and wait a few months after the system is in the hands of more people, and you know, after the negativity has mostly died down. I don't even know what the state of the world is going to be like in a few months from now, but even still, if things remain relatively calm, that's when you can just say, hey, by the way, Metroid Prime 4, it's coming out in September. Here's a cool new trailer. Get excited, regardless of whether you own a Switch 2 or a Switch 1. This game is going to be an absolute banger. So yeah, that's what I think about Metroid Prime 4, the game itself, and the situation surrounding it. Either way, I'm excited for this game. If worse comes to worse and I'm not able to get a Switch 2 by the time this game is out, I'll at least play it on my Switch 1, and then I'll save a Switch 2 playthrough for later, because you know, with Metroid games, you gotta play those games more than once. You gotta play it like 17 times at the very least. But let me know in the comments, what do you think of Metroid Prime 4, the situation surrounding it, and the Switch 2? Sound off, but be respectful in the comments. Anyway, thank you for watching, and I gotta thank my beautiful YouTube members over here. Like, if you want to be a member and support the channel for early access to some videos, be sure to hit that join button down below, if the join button's even below anymore. I'm not sure. YouTube's a weird beast. Either way, I'll see you all later. Bye bye.